to the Energy, Climate Change, and Environmental Justice Committee. I'm joined by Council Members Gil Cedillo, Mr. Krikorian, and Mr. O'Farrell. We have a number of cards on general public comments, so I'm going to take those up first. Let me just bring them up in just a second. Give me just a second. Kathy Schaffer, or Schaefer, I should say. You want to come up? So you fill out a card for general public comment, or is there a specific item? General. Okay, go ahead. Welcome.
Okay, my name is Kathy Schaefer, and I'm here today to tell you about a new coalition of educators, parents, students, and climate allies working under the umbrella of the LA chapter of the Climate Reality Project. Our new group is called the LAUSD, Educators, Parents, and Students for Green Schools. We look forward to assisting schools within LAUSD to reduce their carbon footprints. It is also essential that students, parents, and educators become active participants in preserving our environment. The ultimate goal is to ensure that LAUSD can commit to 100% renewable energy by 2030. We will be reaching out to each of your offices and to the appropriate individuals within LAUSD to discuss our plans and how to best interface with existing policies and sustainability plans. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Will you have a group in the Valley?
The whole city, citywide.
Thank you. I'm going to go ahead and call speakers for item number 7. Molly Bassler.
Present.
Okay, come forward. I'm going to call 2 more speakers. Michael Zelnicker. Yep. Karina Marr. Harveyetter. Harvey. Do you want to start, Ms. Bassler?
Yes. Hi.
You have 1 minute on,
Okay.
minute on item number 7.
Okay, thank you. Hi, I'm Molly Bassler with the Climate Reality Project, and I'm here in favor of the climate emergency mobilization. Sorry. It's very important, as we all know. We have 10 to 12 years, as the IPCC states, and global warming and climate change is not something out there. It's here and present. We see with the fires, the flooding, and it's just going to get worse. So I cannot figure out why there would be any trepidation in acting upon this department and moving it forward. So we are in favor of it with Councilmember Paul Koretz. We think it is viable and important because we want to be on the right side of history, and we're all relying on our public servants to help us out and move things forward that are in favor of green living. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next speaker. Hello.
Hi, I'm Michael Zelnicker. I'm the co-chair of the Los Angeles chapter of the Climate Reality Project. We're here to debate the necessity of establishing a climate emergency mobilization department, illustrating emergency. I just spent the weekend in San Francisco doing a promise to protect training, discussing how we continue to take action against the Keystone XL pipeline and the Alberta tar sands extraction project. On the flight home yesterday, I overheard a flight attendant talking to one of her colleagues about how devastated she continues to feel about the loss of her home and the homes of her entire community in last year's wildfires. It was heartbreaking to hear the pain in her voice. According to a new study by scientists at the EPA, by the end of the century, the consequences of unchecked climate change will cost the United States hundreds of billions of dollars per year, from losses from catastrophic weather events, including drought, to loss of economic growth in areas that rely on winter sports tourism, to increased health risks from air pollution and high temperatures. No region of the country will escape these costs over the years. Illustrating mobilization, the good news is researchers found that cutting emissions of carbon dioxide. Okay, if the city of Los Angeles will not lead on this issue, who will? If we will not do it now, then when?
Thank you very much. Next speaker.
I'm Dr. Karina Mayer. I'm also with the Climate Reality Project, and I'm a pediatrician, and I see firsthand the effects on children's health from climate change, air pollution, toxic metals, all of it. And we cannot deny that climate change is here and that we need to act. So not continue talking about it, but we need to act. So this is crucial for all of us.
Thank you. Next speaker.
My
Sir,
name's...
did you mean to speak on all of the items this afternoon, or just seven?
There are things I'd like to say on everything. I wanted to make
Okay, I just want to make sure I give you the appropriate time.
Pardon?
I want to make sure I give you the appropriate time. Put 2 minutes, because he's filled out cards for all of the items. Did you also have general public comments as well?
Yes.
Okay, then it's 3 minutes. 2 minutes for all items and 1 minute for general public comment. Go ahead.
In reference, my name is Harveyetter. I'm speaking for myself and for the Public Solar Power Coalition. We've been working 40, 50 years on solar and policy. Want to incorporate by reference a contract that we did with the Public Utilities Commission in '81 called the Low Income Solar Equity Program. An example, this was to evaluate local, state, and federal programs. It was the first earmark for low income done in the state. And an example was, you used to have refundable tax credits up to $3,000 for the state of California for low income. So if you can get up to, for a hot water, space, and electric system, $9,000, it was refundable, and you could use that money for a down payment to buy a place. So there was an example of housing and other things. Anyway, the investor-owned utilities, they went bankrupt 20 years ago and are going bankrupt now. There's a buying authority that's being looked at of the investor-owned utilities. LA has the largest muni in the country. With SMUD and the other munis, we've got about 20%, over 20% of the load. Now with CCAs, which we were instrumental in getting here, working with the Sierra Club, et cetera. And we're ahead of a committee with the Sierra Club looking into transitioning. The state has already spent tens of billions of dollars in subsidizing the IOUs. So if it's going to be a buying authority, it should be public, and for public and equitable, just, immediate solar transition. We've litigated for the last 40 years with the state on the Air District, and want to incorporate by reference in the 16 plan the Solar New Deal, about 40 exhibits. Also,
Sir, I'm going to interrupt you for just a second.
Pardon?
Can you hold this time? You need to speak to the items you signed up for.
okay, I'm speaking to them. They're all okay.
Actually, you're not. So I'm going to go ahead and
Also,
give you your 1 minute so you can speak about all the general public comment, because you really need to adhere to the items that you filled out cards
I could
for.
explain why
So,
really I have
let me
other
give you
things
your
to
1
say.
minute, and then you can
Okay.
just go ahead and talk about whatever you need to talk about
this
pertaining to this committee.
This department should not include geoengineering or carbon sequester. Okay? This is extremely important. Incorporate by reference the book, The Uninhabitable Earth, Life After Warming, published earlier this year by David Wallace Wells. We're in the 6th great extinction in the history of the planet. They've all been from carbon and methane. The state's pushing natural gas and methane. It's against the law. It violates the Health and Safety Code 53002B. It's policy of the state from '81. There's a lot more stuff that we'd like to say. Oh, in reference to what was on here before, in reference to the community forestry, we got a living Christmas tree in the White House with the first administrator of EPA in 1970 and had a successful lot in '71 and worked with Beautify LA and the Parks Department to get those trees recycled and donated to the Parks Department. This is something that we'd like to start up again. This was before the tree people were formed. Anyway, out of time, I guess. Would like to talk with you more.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm going to call the next 4 speakers. Lisette Hernandez, are you here? Lisette? Eric Roman? Eric? Laura Garcia? Is Laura Garcia here? There you are. How about Hugo Garcia? Hugo. Mr. Garcia, welcome. Let's go ahead and start with Lisette. You have 1 minute, and you've all only filled out cards for items number 7. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, go ahead, Lisette.
Good afternoon, council members and staff. We'd like to first thank you, we being the LEAP LA Coalition, for all the leadership that you have provided, and as well as the collaborative effort that you have made with our coalition in the last couple of weeks. We have submitted an addendum to respond to many of the questions and points that were raised at the last hearing. Essentially, we would still like to keep all the sort of aspects of the work, particularly the community assemblies, the hiring of a general manager for a new department that would do a climate budget, and that would develop a climate emergency management plan across the city in different districts, prioritizing frontline communities and voices. And we have definitions for all those things. There are some aspects that I think are still remaining. I think someone had raised, what's the healing aspect of this work? So we didn't get to some of that stuff, but I would say that about 90 to 95% of the items are in there. So thank you so much.
All right, thank you very much. Next speaker, Eric?
Good morning, everyone. Eric Roman, also from the LEAP LA Coalition. Again, echo my colleagues' comments that we really appreciate collaboration with the council offices on this committee and also with the CAO and CLA. We met with them a couple of times. We are really eager to see the city move forward and establish a robust department. The level to deal with the climate emergency, but also the emergency of environmental injustice throughout communities in Los Angeles. The level of coordination that will be required to ensure that LA meets our greenhouse gas reduction goals according to the latest science, and also meets the needs of frontline communities facing environmental racism currently. It also meets the needs of workers who potentially stand to be displaced, is high. We need a department that is well funded, that has the powers necessary to meet all of those goals simultaneously. We're encouraged by the steps that you are potentially going to take today towards that end. Thank you.
Thank you. Laura, I called you Garcia, but it's Gracia. I apologize.
That's okay.
Okay, go ahead.
Hi, everyone. So just to build off of what was already said, we addressed a lot of the different items that were asked for, and really want to emphasize this aspect on community assemblies. A lot of the frontline communities have already been organizing for years to stop the pollution in the community, and so we really want to build off that leadership and strengthen people's participation to ensure that we're really reaching a true just transition in frontline communities. And we also want to address the pilot projects. The pilot projects are, as mentioned, something that folks have already been working on. So we don't have to start from scratch. The Green New Deal can build off of, and this department can build off of what community has been organizing for years and decades. That's it.
Thank you. Next speaker is Mr. Garcia. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. I'm with Esperanza Community Housing, and we're a member of the LEAP LA Coalition. And we'd like to thank this committee for so far what has transpired here and the support for the new department. I also want to emphasize the community assemblies as an integral part of that, and particularly addressing the needs of low-income frontline communities of color. So we look forward to continued collaboration with the city, and I want to thank you in advance for your support.
Thank you very much. I'm going to call the next four speakers. Thank you. The next speaker is Laura Muraida. Laura, are you here? Charlie Carnell. Charlie, are you here? Margarita Lopez Pelayo. Is Margarita Lopez Pelayo here? And Kate Barley, I'm sorry. Do you want to start, Laura?
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Laura Muraida, and I'm with SCOPE, and we are a grassroots organization based in South Los Angeles. And I'm here on behalf of our hundreds of South LA resident grassroots members and leaders, as well as the thousands of South LA residents that we engage on a yearly basis on issues of economic and environmental justice. And just here in support of the Climate Emergency Mobilization Department as well, as a member of the LEAP Coalition, and we are in support of the 3 primary steps in beginning this effort, which includes the community assemblies, the infrastructure for the department, as well as an assessment of internal efforts that are ongoing. We particularly are invested in seeing the community assembly process prioritize the voices of frontline communities, and are willing to support in whatever way we can to help inform what that process should look like. Thank you.
Thank you. Charlie?
Hi, my name is Charlie Carno, and I'm a research analyst for Unite Here Local 11, the Hospitality Workers Union. On behalf of our over 20,000 members in Los Angeles and Orange counties, I just want to express our support for the Climate Emergency Mobilization Department, and in particular the community assemblies. I think that we have a chance here not just to better coordinate city departments or even address or even make our environment a little bit better, but really work on democratizing our economy, and by giving people the ability to organize to deal with these very real economic and environmental challenges. So I would strongly support the creation of this department, and we really urge support for the community assemblies. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, Margarita.
Hi, I'm Kate Barley, and I'm with Climate Reality Los Angeles. I wanted to just revisit why we're all here. I was very moved by the opening words in the original motion for the Climate Emergency Mobilization Department, quoting Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., "We are now faced with the fact that tomorrow is today. We are confronted with the fierce urgency of now. In this unfolding conundrum of life and history, there is such a thing as being too late. This call for worldwide fellowship that lifts neighborly concern beyond one's tribe, race, class, and nation is in reality a call for an all-embracing and unconditional love for all men. This oft misunderstood and misinterpreted concept has now become an absolute necessity for the survival of mankind." We are in support of the Climate Emergency Mobilization Department. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Margarita?
Hi, my name is Margarita Lopez Pelayo, and I'm here on behalf of Pacoima Beautiful and the Northeast San Fernando Valley to support the implementation of a Climate Emergency Mobilization Department. For too long, our communities have suffered the health and economic burden of our fossil fuel usage. We believe that through this department, the city will be taking the right step in the direction to the transformation from fossil fuel to clean energy. However, we also believe that equity must be a fundamental value for this new department in order to ensure that frontline communities like Pacoima are prioritized with resources and innovative programming. In order to address the negative impact of climate change, it is imperative that the Climate Emergency Mobilization Department to begin at the communities that have suffered from neglect the longest. More importantly, we expect the Climate Emergency Mobilization Department to partner with communities as opposed and act in behalf of them.
Thank you very much. That concludes speakers on items number 7. 2 more speakers signed up for general public comment, which I had already taken. But I'll go ahead and call them again. Sybil Azer, are you here?
Yeah, I'm right here.
General public comment?
Yeah, it's also item 7, but I can do general public comment. I can do general.
Do you want to do general public comment? How about Kathy Schaefer? You already went. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and take you. Okay, so after you, we'll be done with general public comment and item 7 as well. Go ahead.
Okay, great. I wanted to thank everyone for forming this Climate Emergency Mobilization Department. I'm Sybil Azer. I live in the San Fernando Valley in Sherman Oaks. I'm a member of the Los Angeles chapter of the Climate Reality Project, and I'm a co-founder of the LAUSD, getting them to sign on to 100% committed renewable energy by 2030. I also wanted to highlight when we're starting to plan for how we're going to mobilize and the logistics of this. I know that there's a bill in the California State Senate that's in play right now. I would urge you to reach out to your contacts in the California legislature. Assembly Bill 1080 and Senate Bill 54, the California Circular Economy and Plastic Pollution Reduction Act, which calls for all single-use packaging and products sold in California to be reduced or recycled by 75% by 2030. The bill also creates incentives and policies to encourage in-state manufacturing using recycled material. So we all know that plastics are a huge part of the fossil fuel issue, so I would love for us to get something similar going or get big support so they can fast track.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, that concludes our speakers for general public comment as well as other items on this agenda. So we're going to go ahead and close public comment. Mr. City Clerk, let's go ahead and take up some items on consent. If there are, without objection, unless any member has any questions, I'd like to take up items number 1 through 6 on consent. Okay, thank you, Mr. Cedillo and Mr. Corretz. You want to read those into the record, please?
Certainly, Madam Chair. Item number 1 relates to communication from the mayor relative to the appointment of Ms. Shelley Levin-Billick to the Community Forest Advisory Committee. Number 2, also communication from the mayor relative to the reappointment of Mr. Aaron Thomas to the Community Forest Advisory Committee. Item number 3, Building and Safety Report requesting authority to submit and accept an enforcement assistance grant from Cal Recycle. Number 4, CAO report and resolution relative to authorizing the Bureau of Sanitation to apply, accept, and execute agreements with the State Water Resources Control Board for funding from its Orphan Site Cleanup Grant Program. Number 5, DWP and City Attorney reports and ordinance relative to the approval of the sale of real property located in the City of Bishop. Number 6, Department of Water and Power report and resolution relative to the approval of Amendment Number 8 for software subscription and support monthly license charge software with IBM. That completes items 1 through 6.
All right, thank you very much. So those items will move on consent without objection. That will be the order. Let's go ahead and take up item number 7. Colleagues, this is a follow-up from last month's discussion that Mr. Corretz's motion on the Climate Emergency Management Department. At this time, we held the matter in committee, and we asked the staff to come back with us today with new developments. So we stuck to our commitment, and I want to ask our staff to please come forward. The CLA's office, the CAO's office. Sure. Yeah, Mr. Prieto, that would be great. And I understand Mr. Corretz has some positive developments since our last meetings, which I'll let you talk about that after we get the report from our staff. Just going to give Mr. Prieto some time to. Sorry. It's okay. While you do that, I do want to thank staff for making the time to meet with the advocates from the LEAP Coalition. I know that sometimes smaller community groups don't always have access to City Hall or can make their way down here as opposed to other mainstream organizations. So I really appreciate the fact that you made time and you respected their time as well to be able to meet with you. So I appreciate that. You want to start with your staff update?
Yes, so good afternoon. My name is Ida Rubio, and I'm with the City Administrative Office. And I'm here today with my colleague from the CLA, Rafael Prieto. And we provided a second report back to you regarding a new climate emergency mobilization department. If you recall, at our last meeting on March 19th, we presented a joint report which talked about the feasibility of establishing a potential new department. And we discussed at a high level some of the city's current strategies and programs being implemented to address the impacts of climate change. And our report outlined through potential governance options for consideration. At the conclusion of that meeting, you provided us with some further direction and asked us to report back on several of those items. Specifically, one of the instructions was to meet with the coalition and the CEMD advocates to gain further insight and clarity on their objectives and priorities. And so, as you mentioned, we did meet with them, and we had a very good meeting with them. It also provided us an opportunity to talk to them about the city process and structure and some of the administrative or bureaucratic hurdles that we might have to go through. But the meeting was very fruitful, and it provided some insight onto what their primary issues of concern are. And to summarize those issues at a high level, the advocates felt that the current sustainability initiatives being implemented were too broad-based and not targeted specifically to frontline communities. They felt that the quality of the public health in their communities was in need of attention and required some intervention at the local level. And the current forum for input and engagement for frontline communities needed to be improved. And so we collectively identified some potential next steps and outlined those for you in the report. And the coalition also submitted a public document, which I'm sure hopefully you've had a chance to read, which provided some additional information for your consideration. And so if you have any additional questions, we're here to help you through that.
Mr. Prieto, did you want to add anything?
Simply, I think Mr. Rubio actually covered the majority of it, but our report is structured to respond back to your initial prioritized request, and as well to allow the coalition to submit their document, their addendum, which I believe they've submitted today. So moving forward, any of those elements that you'd like to incorporate, we'll include in any upcoming review.
All right, members, why don't we start off with Mr. Corrales?
Thank you, Madam Chair, for hearing this item today and for your staff's hard work with the LEAP LA Coalition and with my office. And we've been working on what a climate emergency mobilization should look like in Los Angeles with equity and with environmental justice at front and center. And I also want to thank Mayor Garcetti and his staff for working with us to find a way forward to combine our work here with his upcoming announcements and his strong climate leadership, which we'll hear more about tomorrow and in a couple of weeks. I also want to thank the LEAP LA Coalition for working very hard with the CLA and CAO to inform the reports and give us sort of the heart and soul of this groundbreaking effort. And I want to thank all of you here today for showing up to support this important effort as well. As the coalition has clearly stated, the quality of public health and frontline and historically marginalized communities is in critical need of improvement. We want to make sure that as we move forward into an absolutely essential clean energy future, we use the opportunity to create wins for everyone, fix the environmental racism and mistakes of the past, ensure that we don't make the same mistakes going forward, and most importantly, reduce the city's greenhouse gas emissions at an emergency pace, consistent with the United Nations report and others that all say we have a maximum of 12 years, and that's probably generous to turn things around if we want the human race to survive. And that timeline, of course, is now 11 and a half years. 6 months have gone by and counting. So instead of sending us off to a consultant and spending a lot of money to tell us what we already know, I'm asking my fellow committee members to move us urgently forward today. This is going to be an ongoing conversation over many months as we work together with the city government and advocates. But I'd like to propose that we take a couple of bold first steps today so that as the city council receives the mayor's budget in the next few days, the CEMD can be part of those conversations, and then we'll commit to continuing to work together, developing what the rest of this can look like. First and foremost, we need to create a climate emergency commission to oversee this effort. To address this country's original environmental justice sin, I'd like the first seat of this commission to be made up of an indigenous appointee from the local historic tribes, followed by 5 appointees from Cal environmental screen communities in Los Angeles, 1 appointee from labor, an appointee by the council president, an appointee from the chair of this committee, and some non-voting issue experts on climate science, air quality, toxics and workforce, and some non-voting advisors from city departments like DWP, sanitation, planning, DOT, and our petroleum advisor. Second, we want to create the Office of Climate Emergency Mobilization Director and immediately initiate the process to hire that person using existing funds set aside in the UB, which is the unallocated balance, and using the LEAP LA Coalition's proposals in helping to craft that job description. Third, we want to initiate a community assemblies process as soon as possible under the guidance of the director and the commission using funds from the UB. Community assemblies will be a series of meetings engaging frontline communities across the city and receiving their leadership on developing the policies for this effort. Having the community voice leading this effort has been an essential component since our very first press conference on this issue nearly 2 years ago, and establishing an effective and ongoing community assemblies process we believe is essential to our success. One of the most important and wise things I heard at the Governor's Climate Summit last September from a young teen activist was, the voice you are missing from the conversation will be the voice that has the answers you seek. And so we hopefully will not be missing those voices. Fourth and last for me, at least for today, by moving this package forward, I want to formalize the city's declaration of a climate emergency by asking the CLA to draft a resolution. In the opinion of many of cities across the country and the world, they thought we'd already done so by budgeting $500,000 for a climate emergency department last year, but I want to formalize it because it's a vitally important component of a larger movement. Just since we last met, San Francisco and Chico have officially declared climate emergencies, bringing the total of cities since Councilmember Blumenfield and I first introduced the Climate Emergency Mobilization Department motion to 436, representing over 39 people. Our effort apparently inspired Berkeley's, which inspired Richmond, Oakland, and Santa Cruz, which inspired London, England, which in turn inspired hundreds of other cities. Even though we're on the list by the organization that keeps the list of cities that have declared climate emergencies, we just want to make it clear that we have done that. This doesn't attempt to open up emergency funding, although that would be appropriate. It just sends a message that to Washington, D.C., that climate denial is not acceptable behavior, and that climate change is a real emergency, and that we finally, as a civilization, are beginning to approach the climate catastrophe with the gravity and seriousness that it merits. And that's all, especially because the federal government is failing us all in this regard. So we know we need to dramatically ramp up and focus our efforts towards the climate emergency mobilization, with all of society working towards the same goal, a safe, just, and equitable climate future. And so, and that is not just for our grandchildren and our great-grandchildren and our children, but even for those who are alive today in toxic neighborhoods. So that's the package I'd like to ask my colleagues to move forward today, and more will come in the future through continuing conversations.
All right. Members, do you have any comments, any questions? Mr. O'Farrell?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Mr. Koretz, for your leadership on this life and death issue before us, facing not just Los Angeles but the world. So it's great that we get another chance to lead on something that that is so vital to our existence. Just a few questions. So we're talking about this initial step, creating an office and not a department, correct?
Yes, I think it seems to be a consensus that that would be a more appropriate first step. It doesn't preclude a department later if it proves that we need one.
Right. And what department do we have a sense it may end up being part of?
I think it's most likely to come under the Public Works Department.
Yeah. Okay. And in terms of the request for $500,000 in the UB for this year, you mentioned a budgetary request for fiscal, what is it, we're heading into 20 and 21 already. Right? Yeah, the 1920. But so do you anticipate additional funding for this director position?
I think the $500,000, if we're not able to take this step before the end of the fiscal year, is anticipated to roll over. And I think there's a possibility that a modest additional amount will be added in the mayor's budget.
All right. And our budget and finance chair is shaking his head affirmatively. So So we're good there? Thank you. And can you, Mr. Kretz, what do you envision, or the panel, envision as some of the specifics of the role of the Climate Emergency Mobilization Director?
Well, first step will be to hold these assemblies across the city. Hopefully that'll take place within a few months. And although it's not written into it formally, I would hope that the director could help us to create an action plan of more dramatic steps that we need to look at, and a pace in which we will have to take to reach our goals, hopefully by less than 12 years from now. I think that's optimistic that we even have that long. But a pace so that we don't just get to 10 years from now and say, oh my God, we've only got 10% of the way, but that we actually identify things that we need to do as interim steps all the way through.
And just a couple of more quick questions. To the CAO-CLA, do you have a list of all the nonprofits that have been involved, the environmental nonprofits? Has Hilda Bay been part of this? Have all the traditional...
Mr. O'Farrell, we have a preliminary list. Most of the organizations on there are very familiar to us. I don't know if it's a complete list. I believe that's also why we kind of recommended conducting, as we conducted community assemblies or community engagement, that we would reach out to as many organizations as possible to ensure we included as many. It is not a complete list.
All right. Okay.
I can't tell you that Heal the Bay and Clean Seas Coalition, among others, sent in letters of support.
Yeah. And then on the non-voting question on the issue experts, what is the reason that they wouldn't have a vote? There wouldn't be a vote from that.
I think it's been more envisioned that it would just add too many members and be too unwieldy. But it would be important that they were involved as advisors and provide us with the science and substance of the actions that we take.
And then these open houses or town halls that the new director may engage in would also inform how that structure would be in terms of articulating it further before adopting?
That is correct.
Okay.
And I think also the intention is for the commission to be mostly outside of the city, so we have insiders that advise but aren't the majority of voters. The voters are actually citizens from different communities.
Terrific. And the one speaker mentioned the state law that is pending on plastics, elimination, single-use plastic. I introduced a resolution for the city council to support that already, and I think it was in rules today. So,
yes, we approved it in rules this morning.
Wonderful. So I think we'll be on our way. Speaking, we can get it to you. All right. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. O'Farrell. Mr. Krikorian, did you have anything?
Yeah, I'll do my best to be brief, although that's always difficult for me. I want to first, and there's a lot to cover. So first of all, thank you very much, Mr. Kretz. I think that the proposal that you have before us today is not only a good first step, it's really an important and exciting step in the right direction, particularly with the initiation of the community assemblies, because anything bold enough to make a significant difference in addressing climate change is necessarily going to require an enormous degree of community consensus that can only be developed with grassroots outreach in impacted communities and as much stakeholder input as is possible, because we're going to have to do, in order to address climate change, this country is going to need to do things that are going to be unpopular in a lot of circles. And if this is just, putting our finger in the air to see what's the most popular solution, we are not going to make progress on addressing climate. Just by way of context, about 10 years, well, I guess 12 years ago now, I was the author of the Renewable Portfolio Standard Bill in the state legislature to take California to a 33% RPS by next year, by 2020. Unfortunately, after 2 years of work on that bill, Governor Schwarzenegger vetoed it about 5 minutes after the legislature passed it. But it was really important, groundbreaking work in that it embraced stakeholders to be part of the decision making, and it really analyzed, the technical aspects and what needed to be done, not just what sounded good, but what actually needed to be done. And a lot of the pushback that we got at that time came from representatives of disadvantaged communities who were concerned about rate impacts on power rates, for example. So that's why the DWP right now is undertaking the modeling effort it is engaged in to get us to a 100% renewable portfolio in the city of Los Angeles and present the council and the city with many different options for getting there so that we can make the difficult policy decisions that are necessary economically in terms of job creation, electrical rates, all the other things that are going to be necessary to make those decisions. So I think that the community assemblies are vital to do that, and so is the commission. And I think it's important that the commission be representative of the broad range of stakeholders as well. I think what we have is a good start. I share, I think, the question that Mr. O'Farrell raised with regard to the technical expertise. I'd like the people who have actual technical expertise on climate science and air quality and toxics and workforce to actually be fully participating in this commission and to be voting, members, because they are people with expertise. I think it's important if we're going to have, for example, a representative of labor, which makes sense because of all the great job creating aspects of this, that you would also have some representative of the small business community, which actually employs more people in the renewable energy field than there are in any organized workforce in Southern California. So it would make sense to have small business representation. If we're going to have representatives of the other groups in here, I think it would be important to have advocates for ratepayers as well, to be able to talk about the economic impact on the most impacted communities in our city. So I'm not 100% wedded at this point to the exact makeup of this commission. I think we ought to consider other aspects that may develop the consensus that we need. I think moving the commission forward is really important, but if you'd be willing to do it, Mr. Kretz, I think we ought to consider whether there are other categories of stakeholders whose voice should be heard in this dialogue as well. And I think that covers what I wanted to say. But and then the other thing is the mission. I want to make sure, because we're declaring a climate emergency declaration. So I just want to caution that as we do that, let's all be mindful of the fact that we are going to say that climate change is the most important issue that we're addressing with this effort, which means that there are going to be trade-offs. There may be even trade-offs that some within the environmental community might favor, some might oppose. We can't do all of this with rooftop solar. And even if we did, then we're producing, photovoltaic cells using silicon and other things that have their own toxic impacts. We're using battery storage, which has its own toxic impacts. So there are going to be a lot of trade-offs that have to be made, even within an environmental agenda. And I think it's important, if we're going to do the things as you've said, and I agree with you, the bold things that haven't been talked about yet, I think we all have to be mindful of the fact that that may entail things that, as I started, may not be the most popular choices. And I just want to make clear that if that's our intent, we make that clear right now, that climate change is the paramount consideration. So I welcome any thoughts that
Well,
you have on those
it
comments.
certainly wouldn't be a tough sell for me. I think, that is my personal opinion. I can't speak for the council. The membership of the commission was a compromise between a number of people we talked with, but I don't really disagree with the things you suggested. So I would be willing to change the 3 non-voting policy and issue experts on climate science, et cetera, to 3 voting, and also to create a seat for a small business representative. So that would maintain the odd, even voting patterns, so you don't automatically create a tie potential. But we'd add 4 seats. So I think that would be workable. I don't think that will shake anybody up too much, so I think that would be fine to add.
Okay, Mr. Cedillo, do you have any questions?
Just marginal things, for example, on the composition of the governance. I notice members of the mayor's staff here. I know that the mayor, that the charter provides for the mayor to have to dictate governance in many of these instances. So I don't know if you've talked to the mayor about this. Are we creeping into his jurisdiction, his bailiwick? Of course, I'm pleased, as from our last conversation, and Mr. Krikourian has noted also, that while this is paramount, that there's every step of the way, first step forward, there's always choices that we make. And so those are choices that we make about employment, about housing, about rent. I don't think when we anticipated the collection of trash that we were anticipating that we would displace poor people, right? And so we developed a scheme because of the urgency of the environment. But there's a different urgency when you're a senior and you live in Chinatown and you're going to be displaced because we've changed your trash pickup scheme and now it makes your affordable housing unit in a 100% housing building unaffordable. So again, those are always choices, things that we must keep in mind. We can, like in this instance, go back and fix that. But I agree with Mr. Krikourian that we are going to be making choices each step of the way.
And I have discussed this with the mayor, and the mayor would be making the appointments not called out to the council president and the chair of this committee. So the mayor would, working in coordination with all of us, make the final appointment in all the other positions.
Okay. If there are no other further questions, I'm going to go ahead, Mr. Koretz. I do want to say, though, to the rest of the committee, this is just, there will be plenty of more discussion as we move forward, and this is we're just acting on a commitment today to move forward with the commission. Mr. Koretz, I need you to read a shorter version of your recommendations that yes. I want us to be able to read into the record so that we don't have any questions about, including the fact that you've accepted Mr. Krikourian's recommendations on the makeup of the voting members of the commission. Can you go ahead and read those?
Sure. So number 1, we'd establish a climate emergency commission with appointees from one indigenous appointee from historic local tribes, Gabrielino Tongva, or, and I can't pronounce this one, Fernandino Tatavian. Okay, Tatavian. Item B, 5 appointees from Cal Enviro Screen Communities in Los Angeles. Number C, 1 labor appointee. Number D, 1 city council president appointee. Number E, 1 chair of Energy, Climate Change, and Environmental Justice Committee appointee. 3 voting members. This would be number F. 3 voting members that are issue policy experts on climate science, air quality, toxics, and workforce. Number G, non-voting AGM level representation from DWP, sanitation, planning, DOT, and the Petroleum Administrator's Office. And number H, a small business rep. Number 2, create the Office of the Climate Emergency Mobilization Director, or CEMD. initiate the process to hire the director with existing UB funds. Number 3, initiate community assemblies under direction of the director and the Climate Emergency Commission using existing UB funds. And item number 4, formalize the city's climate emergency declaration by instructing the CLA to draft an official resolution. When the council approved the climate emergency mitigation motion on May 1st, 2018, the council acknowledged the climate emergency the city and region are in and the need to pursue immediate action. This will formalize the city's declaration as 436 other municipalities representing 39 million people have already done. And that's the motion.
Very well. So I'm going to go ahead and move on Mr. Corretz's recommendations. Are there any objections? Seeing none, that will be the order. Thank you very much. Thank you for being here. There is no other further business before the committee, so our committee is adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.